How should a market farmer or homesteader gardener who's saving their seed think about scale? A lot of market farmers growing on a standard bed, 30 inches wide, 100 feet long. If you tried to save all the seed off of that bed, my mind thinks that's going to be an enormous amount of seed that you have to save because the seed is just multiplied uh, exponentially from the amount of fruit on that bed. If I'm saving seed and I'm growing on 100-foot beds for this sake of this conversation, how should I think about how much to segregate off for seed production? If it's for me to save for myself, I'm not selling for contract. That's a different story because that means the volume has to go way up. But I can see somebody saying, oh, I'm going to grow 50 feet of this, save it all. And they end up with pounds of lettuce seed, which is a way too much seed for one person to use in its lifespan.
So, this is a fantastic. I love this question because this is where it overlaps my love for crop planning and spreadsheets and my love for
Right.
growing seeds. And the answer depends on what crop you're growing. Like, so if you think about tomatoes and you think about the number of seed in one fruit and how many plants you grow, let's say even if you grow 1,000 plants a year or 2,000 plants a year, you might only need 2, 3, 5 tomatoes to have enough for 3 years of seed. So
Not
that's
plants, tomatoes.
tomatoes. Yes, tomato fruits. Like if you if you look at cherry tomatoes, especially, like how many hundred seeds are in a little fruit? There's at least 50, but there may be 100 or 200 seeds in there. So you don't need a lot of tomatoes to grow to be in control of your tomato seed supply forever. Which is why I think growing seed is really important. And if you're growing a hybrid, that's something different. But if it's an open pollinated variety, keep your tomato seeds, keep your pepper seeds. You won't have to go buy any anymore. And that's from small areas, and you don't even have to worry about having a cordoned off area that's seed production. Now, on the other side is something like beans. If you're growing 100 feet of beans, I don't know how much seed you need to plant for that, maybe like a pound or two to get 100 feet of beans. It takes more plants to do that. And if you grow, a bed every week or every 2 weeks throughout the whole growing season, let's say they're bush varieties that you're harvesting twice, not something you're picking over and over, you need a lot of pounds, and you might need to hold off something like 10 or 20% of your production would need to be kept to have enough seed to grow it. Because with something like the beans, you got to leave the pods on your plants, especially in a short season like we have. We can't both pick the bean down and leave it on the plant to mature. And so this is actually why I don't really recommend beans as a great starting seed crop. So they're a fantastic starting seed crop, but maybe not for a market grower, because already beans might not be the most profitable crop. And then having to take some of that space to grow the seed is even making the crop probably less profitable on your farm. Though I felt like, not to say you shouldn't grow bean seed, but just they're not necessarily the profitable fit. So that's kind of different ways of thinking about it. When you start growing seed, don't worry about the yield so much. Start with a few plants. But if you really want to be making sure you're growing enough seed, you can do a crop planning exercise. So if you know the yield of the seed yield you can expect per bed foot or per plant, then it's a matter of, let's say I need 10 pounds of beans a year. Or let's do a different crop. Let's say I need like 3 pounds of arugula seed a year for my salad mixes. And if I know that I can get 30 grams per bed foot, then if I do, say, I'm working in pounds and grams here.
I think grams is like 900 or 450, right, per pound or something.
Yeah. So let's say I'm working. Let's say I want 1 kilogram, so it's about 2.5 pounds or 2.2 pounds of arugula seed, and I'm getting something like, let's just make the math easy. We're getting 40 grams per bed foot. Then if I grow 50 bed feet, so 50 times 40, it's that right? 50 times 40. Yeah, that's going to give me,
Two
or is it 20?
kilograms. That's two
Yeah,
kilograms.
20 times 50. If I have 20 bed feet, I'll be able to get that kilogram off of that. So, and I should say that in the Seed Farmer book, I have yields for all the different crops that I talk about. And this is one thing that I made a point of putting in the book because there's not many books that have seed yields in them. So I made sure to have rough seed yield estimates in the book that you can use. There's also some spreadsheets for crop planning, but we don't have to get into that right here. But knowing your yield, so an estimated yield, and knowing how much seed you use in a year, which comes from your seed order that you're doing anyway with your part of your crop plan, means you can figure out how many bed feet that you need. And then, so let's say we do need 20 bed feet of arugula to have enough arugula seed for 1 year. Well, arugula seed, it can store for multiple years. So you should try to grow at least 3 years worth at once. So then you're at 60 bed feet. And then you're going to add a safety factor, maybe 30% more. Maybe you grow 75 bed feet, let's say. So with 75 bed feet, you should have more than enough seed for your next 3 years of arugula. And then you don't have to grow it every year. And so that's how I would do that math and go through that process. But again, I wouldn't, that's when you start growing seed, like when you're a new seed grower with beginner seed mind, you don't worry about that unless you love the numbers, but you don't worry about that. Once you've grown seed for a few years and you want to have a reliable quantity, then those are questions you start asking yourself a little bit more.
So the fruiting crops, those seem easy. You can just pull seed right out of your production bed row. So you're harvesting stuff to sell, and then you're harvesting seed right out of it. No extra needed because the seed density per plant is so high. Because I could see if you have limited space. Well, if you have super limited space on a quarter acre, you're not necessarily doing this for arugula or beans, like you said. If you go up in acreage and you have some room, I could see not wanting to tie up prime production bed space while you're waiting for that seed to get mature, because that bed is now tied up. And if you're treating the bed differently, watering it differently, like we've talked about before, it's maybe screwing up the whole block. Is there a scenario where for those non-fruiting types, you could say, all right, let's have some bed blocks that are just for seed production? So they're not getting in the way. They can move at their own pace. They can be managed according to how they need to be managed. And then we can manage production crops as production crops over here.
So yes. And I would just add, I'm going to add in a couple, like, so you made a comment about, like valuable real estate. And this is something that seed might still be a good crop in a valuable real estate situation. For sure, there's the skill that you have to learn. Okay, but that aside, some seed is expensive. If you're buying tatsoi or Mizuna seed for salad greens, that costs, it's on the cheaper side of brassica greens. But if you're growing some of the specialty mustards, or maybe some Tokyo Bacana, or Yukina Savoy, those are much more expensive, sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 times the price. It's possible, like, you are probably still getting $40,000 to $60,000 an acre. So that breaks down to what, like maybe like $6 to $10 a bed foot off of some of those seed crops. So the price, like that value, might be comparable. Like that, the savings by not having to buy that seed might be valuable enough to justify that space.
So it might balance out the yield you'd get from selling the greens.
Yes. Now, but there's another step in this, is that for a lot of brassica greens, and even, let's not go lettuce, but a lot of brassica greens, you could harvest 1, 2, 3 cuts from the plants and then get the seed. So, because they're going to go to flower anyway, and you'll probably still get a good seed yield off of it, even though you've harvested it multiple times. So the vegetable crop has paid for the real estate, and the seed crop, now it does mean you're not getting a second succession. You're not flipping it to something else, because it's going to be there for another month or two. And that gets into some of the other questions you mentioned, but it's planted, it's weeded. At that point, there's not much you need to do except let it go up, and then you're harvesting it and cleaning the seed, which is a different skill set. But once you know what you're doing, cleaning 10 or 20 pounds of arugula seed is much easier than harvesting and cleaning like salad mix. It's so once you know what you're doing. So you can get your cake and eat it too, in the sense of you can harvest your market crop and you can let it go to seed and then get a seed crop off of it. Though you are compromising the possibility of flipping it and putting like radishes or carrots or something in that same space. So that's one part. The other part, though, and is how does having a seed crop interfere with the other beds beside it? So if you have, like, let's say it's a small farm, a little micro farm, and you have 10 beds in your salad green area, and you have another 10 beds of something else. If you're overhead watering those salad green beds and you're overhead watering the whole block at once, then having one bed in bolted flowers is going to be in your way. And in that case, you're going to hate it. Now, maybe there's a way for you to just move like if you have it on the edge of the section, maybe you could just move the sprinkler so it's not covered, and that might be adequate. Another thing that you might do is you probably have some crops that are maybe on drip tape. Like if you have tomatoes or peppers or eggplants, those are probably not being overhead watered. Then they might be, but if they're not, you could have your seed crops in that section. And so maybe you would overhead water it a small area in the early season to get it going, and maybe to harvest it as a vegetable crop, and then shut down the overhead watering and then just leave it, like, depending where you are, like where we are, I barely irrigate seed crops after they've started to go to flower. Not everybody has the potential to do that. If you have really hot summers and it's very dry, you might not be able to do that. But if you are able to do it, it's fantastic. You just, you establish it and then you can let it just go to seed. So that's a way to have, I guess I'm losing my thought here a little bit, but that's a way to kind of plan your field, your rotation in function of moving your seed crops, maybe with your tomatoes, peppers, something also like long season crops like onions or leeks. Those might fit in there too. Or maybe with some of the perennial herbs, which probably don't need to be watered the same way that your salad greens are, or your fresh carrots that you've just planted or sown.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. It sheds a lot of light on it. Part one, love that. Get your best of both worlds. Harvest, let it go to seed. And I could see somebody who's on a more limited land base. This just requires a little forward thinking. Spreadsheet, a calendar, whatever. I'm planning this here. It's going to go to seed about here. It's going to need to be in the field at this time. If that's present, where do I want it? What do I want next to it? So just, I think thinking ahead, somebody could work that out.